Travis Reier, hope you're doing well, man. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, Ryan. What's up, man?
Good, man. I was dying for your comments on Twitter yesterday. I know you chimed in a little bit late, but I just knew Travis Reier was going to be exploding on some Gators yesterday. So you held back a little bit, though.
Well, I'm like most people, other than Pops. I pull for Jim McElwain.
So did I.
I hope that he would do well. I thought that he could do well, but it didn't work. It didn't seem as if from the start there was going to be enough to pacify Florida fans, and I think Jim felt that. The thing about that job is it's basically become like an Alabama or an Ohio State, or one of those elite type jobs, in that you can't get caught up in the noise. And the tough thing is sometimes the noise comes from within your own athletics department. And I think that's what bothered McElwain the most. And in talking with some people here in the last 12 to 24 hours that are in that program, basically on a daily basis, I was surprised, because I thought that sort of the narrative would be that, well, it was all Jim's fault and it just didn't work out and Florida needed to move on. But the feedback I actually got was that, there are still some people within that athletics department that don't really benefit the football coach, and tenured individuals that Mac apparently wanted gone, that had input into his program. So it wasn't, put it this way, it wasn't Nick Saban at Alabama, okay, in terms of autonomy in the program. Jim was having to fight some battles from the start. Facilities-wise, I was down there a couple of years ago. It was shocking how far behind Florida had fallen in terms of facilities. He won a few of those battles. They had started to make improvements in that regard. But apparently there were still some issues. And, most coaches are going to have to deal with that. And I think they affected Jim McElwain more than he probably would have liked. And it affected his job performance. And ultimately, all those things come together, and he's out.
Travis, let's go back to when this thing started, when he came from Colorado State. If I'm not misunderstanding, I think he even had to pay some of his buyout.
Yeah, and he's still on the hook. He's still on the hook for some of his buyout. I think it ultimately came out of it came out to be like $1 million of his own money.
How crazy
Colorado State is traveling to Florida next year in a game that McElwain won't coach. And they're getting $2 million to play the game, and that was part of it. That was part of the agreement that they worked out. So yeah, there's still some chicken on the bone from that standpoint.
But Travis, the expectation. What do they want down there? I mean, what are they looking for? I mean, do they really think they compete for a national title every year? Yeah,
they do, and I can't necessarily blame them based on their location, based on their success, especially since 1990. What have they won? 3 national titles since '96. That's a good number. And Spurrier changed the entire narrative down there in terms of expectations, and his presence is still very large. And in some ways, even physically, he's still around, which I think creates a problem in and of itself. I think Florida football and whoever's the coach there, while Spurrier's intentions may be good, I think if you're the head football coach at a place like the University of Florida, you'd appreciate Steve Spurrier's input more if he were giving it from Crescent Beach rather than right there in Gainesville or, out on the circuit. And so, that it's not just that he set the standard and the level of expectations for that program. He's around, pretty heavily. And this isn't to put any of the blame on what happened with Mac on Steve Spurrier. It's just I think the job and the situation would be more attractive to potential candidates to start with and more manageable by a coach once he got in there if Steve's presence wasn't what it was.
Well, I mean, put it in Alabama perspective. Nick Saban retires 4 years from now. He keeps an office over here. I mean,
yeah,
how crazy would that be?
Well, and if you're Dabo Swinney, and you're already at a place that treats you like Nick Saban, you are Nick Saban of Clemson. Even if it is home, even if it is in your heart, you have to consider that. But I think some of it too, as the ex-coach, you have to have some awareness and say, you know what, me being around probably isn't helping this guy. You know what I mean? And take it upon yourself to respect and understand that enough to not be that presence. I mean, because you don't see it really anywhere, do you? Not much. Gene Stallings is a guy that you hear on our station, on your show, talking college football, but he doesn't have an office over at the Malmore Athletic Facility. He's not constantly out on UA affiliated events as sort of a semi-regular mouthpiece for Alabama football. It flies in the face of that one voice approach that Saban and so many other coaches are employing these days, really.
Well, Travis, and I mean, I'm friends with the guy, but I look across the state with Coach Pat Dyer. I look up at Knoxville with Phillip Fulmer. These hang-arounds are doing more harm than they're doing good.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of some other situations, but that's certainly been indicated in some of those realms. Ultimately, it just takes a strong cat. You know what I mean? And that's what was relayed to me, was that the person I spoke with at Florida felt like it was set up for Jim McElwain to fail. And feels like if they go the young coach direction, in other words, a guy that maybe is viewed as a hot up-and-comer, but doesn't really have the cachet built up yet to make demands and sort of set the ground rules for the football program as it relates to the athletics department, the next person is going to fail. So it's not just Jim McElwain that needs to look in the mirror after this situation. It sounds to me like how Florida is set up in terms of football and in relation to the athletics department as a whole is something they need to examine.
Who would you go after? Is this Dan Mullen's job to turn down?
Oh, wow. It'd be hard not to go for Dan. And Dan's one of those guys, once every 3 years it seems like he's hot. And he's hot right now. Now, we'll see what the rest of the month does for Dan Mullen. I would think other than, Alabama, he's set up for a flourish here down the stretch after the win at Texas A&M. And so I think 3 out of 4 in November, with the loss being to Alabama, is very imaginable. And so if that happens, what is he, 9-3? Going to a Florida bowl game in all likelihood, or a Texas bowl game, something like that. I think it would certainly be a possibility for him to make the jump. And he could be one of those guys that could kind of, his relationship previously with Scott Strickland certainly makes sense, that together they could kind of structure that organization in a way that would be more relatable to success than what they had with probably either Muschamp or McElwain.
Travis, in the final couple of seconds here, when we look back at Jim McElwain, do you think he lands on his feet a pretty decent job?
Yeah, I think Mac will be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if, like a lot of people, think he ends up somewhere out west. Mac. I think he's big on quality of life too.
Yes, he is.
His family, being able to still be a big part of that and their happiness. And so, I think there's some places where Mac can go, not put up with maybe as much of the pressure that he felt at Florida, both externally and internally, and win enough to coach for a long time and at the same time enjoy a pretty good quality of life. So that would be my expectation. Maybe not an elite type program this next go around, but at the Power 5 level somewhere in a place where he can win enough to keep people happy and hang around for a while.